Risner, and I want to take a moment to tell you about the most important commitment that I've ever made in my lifetime. I grew up in a home with 4 kids. I was the oldest and went to church occasionally, and eventually that went to church regularly. Sometimes my parents would go, sometimes they didn't go. And I always thought that if I was a good boy, I thought that I would probably go to heaven. That was my thought. I was very performance-oriented. I thought I needed to earn the approval of my parents and of my friends. So I also thought I needed to earn God's approval. However, I had a classmate die, and when that classmate died, that death really caused me to do some thinking. I can still remember being asked, "Keith, when you die, do you think you'll go to heaven?" And my response was, if anybody else goes, I think I'll go because I'm as good as anyone else. Now I look at that and think about how conceited that was. Well, eventually I went to a Bible study for band students, and in that Bible study I heard the gospel. I heard that Christ loved me and had a plan for my life. I heard also that I had sinned, and because of my sin, I wasn't going to be forgiven. And boy, that really hit me. I was a senior in high school at the time. I can remember going home and talking to my parents about it a little bit, but I was going to a church that had a new pastor, and that new pastor was saying some of the same things about being a sinner. Well, I worried about it, wrestled with it for a while, and I can remember then one day, I was in church that day, and the pastor said, "Read John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son." He said, "Leave out the world and put your name there." So I did that in my head, for God so loved Keith Risner that he gave his only begotten Son. And it just struck me that Jesus Christ died for me, and I needed forgiveness. The preacher said, "Hey, if you need to do this," he asked people to come up front. I'd never seen anybody do that before. But I did it. I walked up front and stood there looking at him, and the pastor said, "Just get down there and pray. I'll help you in a minute." And so I got down and just told God I was sorry many times. And the pastor eventually came and helped me to understand that I needed to invite Christ to come into my life. So that's the very thing that I did. I asked him to forgive me of the bad things that I had done and forgive me for turning him away so long, and to come into my life and help me to follow him. Well, he did right then, right there, and I went home, immediately sought out my dad to tell him what I had done, and told some others what I had done. But then I didn't do much after that. I didn't know what to do. That fall, I went away to college, and while I was in college, had some college dorm friends who were Christians. They started a Bible study in one of the dorm rooms. I started attending, started having devotions regularly, praying, reading the Bible, studying, and it just became closer and closer to God. It really made a difference in my life, especially in my relationships with other people. When I realized that I didn't have to earn people's approval, that I could just focus on God and care for people, it really made me a different kind of person. That has been about 48 years ago when that happened. I'm so glad that it did. My life has not been the same. Has anything like that happened to you yet?